Hey Jenny,
Hey Tim!
I got a question for you.
Oh yeah? What is it? That's your film. That sucks. That was so cheesy. It's so gross.
I'm Tim and this is Jenny, and we're practically humans. Today, I have a question for you. What's the difference between being a minimalist and just being cheap?
The difference between minimalism and being cheap.
Because I feel like they can kind of go together a little bit.
Yeah, minimalism is being, I guess, intentional, but being cheap, you could argue, is also like intentional. Minimalism, it's not just about saving as much money as you could or paying the least amount of money that you could. And I think that's what being cheap is. Just like trying to pay as little as you could for anything. You know,
Yeah.
Minimalism is like trying to be intentional with what you're keeping in your life, just so it's less maintenance and more like a peace of mind. It's more like they're both a way of life, but minimalism is just not centrally focused on money. What about you? What do you think the difference is?
I think that's actually a really good description. Cheap. I think if you, they're both of them are very intentional with what they're doing, but the end goal is completely different. The cheap people is just focused on money. And my next question for you was going to be, do cheap people always have to be minimalists, and do minimalists always have to also be cheap?
I don't think that is true at all, because especially several years ago when minimalism was such a big thing, people are not labeling themselves as minimalist and spending the least amount of money that they could. In fact, it could be the total opposite. Just to get that minimalist look, they have to like shell out a lot of money actually. So just because you're a minimalist doesn't mean that you have to be cheap. And being cheap doesn't also mean that you're gonna be a minimalist, because you could be cheap, but you're still like holding on to a lot of stuff that you don't need, and that's just excess.
I don't know if you noticed, but my mouth was open. Because I think that the perfect example is like hoarders. Those people are the cheapest people out there, but they're the complete opposite of minimalists. They just want the things. And that's a completely different category. That's not even about trying to save money at some points.
Yeah.
That's just wanting to possess items.
Yeah.
So would you say you're more of a minimalist or more cheap? Like where on I guess if there's a scale, like minimalist is like let's just say a 1 and cheap is 100, like on that scale, like what number would you be?
I think I'm a good 50.
A good 50?
Yeah, because I try to I am a frugal person, and I don't think being frugal and being cheap are the same at all. You've seen the show Extreme Cheapskates, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not that level of cheap at all. I want like a good quality of life still, So I want to keep as less stuff as possible, and only to keep the things that I really need and really want, but also at the same time spend as little money as I could to get those things that I need or really love.
What's like the best way to find that balance if you're a 50, where you're not too cheap, not too much of just a minimalist?
You could always start at not buying new stuff unless you really need it, and just try to let go of the things that you don't need in your life, like donate them or sell them or just like really throw them. I think there's a lot of guilt associated with throwing things, and I think you experience that. Do you? Like
throwing out things? Yeah. If I feel like I'm like the 0 was a minimalist and the 100 was a cheap, I'm definitely at least over 50. But I'm also not somebody who will just take things in, so in a way it kind of pushes it back towards minimalist. Like I don't even know what would my number be.
For what?
For on the cheap, are you cheap or are you minimalist? What would my number be?
You don't have to be an either or though. It could be I'm a cheap minimalist, because there people. It doesn't mean that you have to you have to spend as little as possible to be a minimalist, because not all minimalists are frugal people at all.
Yeah.
They just want to keep as little possessions as they could in their lives, but those possessions could be really expensive, you know?
I like our balance that we have of frugality and minimalism, and I think they really go well together. One kind of can help balance the other too.
I think so.
Where
Yeah.
I think if you try to be a minimalist, it saves you from being like completely too cheap, because you actually care about the things you're buying sometimes. Where at the same point too, if you're cheap, it helps you be a minimalist. Like they help each other out.
Yeah,
a little
because if you're cheap in the sense that you don't want to spend at all, then that would really help in becoming a minimalist, because you don't want to buy stuff, you don't want to add more stuff into your life, which like he rarely buys anything for himself, and only stuff that he really needs, and finding birthday presents could be really hard because he doesn't want anything, and but he needs stuff, so there's always stuff to buy.
I need you. That's all I need.
Are you more cheap or more minimalist?
I'm more cheap. I'd say I'll not get something because of the price more than I would because I feel like I can't have that because I don't need that as much as I'm not going to get that because it's too expensive, but only a little bit.
Minimalism could be different for everyone, but for me, it's having as little stuff as possible, but also keeping the quality of life that you want. I don't have to own a certain number of things to call myself a minimalist. I'm just intentional of the things that I'm keeping in my life, in our lives.
I'm going to lift my arm over here because it's getting tired. I think that's a good definition of what the difference is between a minimalist and being cheap. You can't really sum it up too quickly, but it's like pornography. You know it when you see it. So thank you for checking out this video. If you liked it, be sure to click like and subscribe.
That would definitely help. Stay minimalist.
We're cheap.
Either way works.